Malungelo, police firing rubber bullets, the latest in this developing story now. These are protests we've seen a number of times over a number of years. The question is, what has government done to listen to the grievances of these communities?
Hi there, Michelle. Well, in fact, we find ourselves exactly here, Michelle, because these residents are saying that nothing has been done about their concerns. It's service delivery issues, Michelle, from electricity to housing. But it seems, though, here in Freedom Park, one of the things residents have been telling me about, Michelle, is that they were promised land by former housing MEC here in Gauteng, Paul Mashatile. That was last year. They're saying that that promise has not been fulfilled. In fact, they're saying that the plots that they were promised were at a place they called Southern Farm, and that they were promised about 48,000 stands were going to be made available, and the promise that was also made was that before they would move into that land, government was going to begin to service that land and provide water and everything. They're saying that they've watched months past, Michelle, and they don't see any work at that site, and hence they decided to take to the streets. As you can see, Michelle, the streets are really strewn with litter and rocks, and also they were burning tires, and you can see that there's also police that are also keeping a watchful eye at this group of protesters here in Freedom Park. Earlier, Michelle, when some of the residents were when police began clearing some of the rubble that was on the road, residents started again to bring that rubble back on the road, and police fired rubber bullets trying to disperse those that were putting that debris back on the road. The residents are clear, Michelle. They're saying that they don't want government no more to give them houses. Now what they want the land so that they can build themselves their own land. And Michelle, the situation that we are seeing playing itself out here in Freedom Park is the situation that I've told you about earlier, where residents in Protea Glen Extension 29, a group of people started invading land because they're saying that they wanted to build themselves homes. And Michelle, this talks to the issue of the need of housing. There's a report that I was reading that says Gauteng has a housing backlog of about 800,000. And also, Michelle, here's also what's interesting. Last year, the Gauteng Human Settlements Department forfeited about 150 million rand that was meant for housing. They couldn't spend that money, and you ask yourself, why when there is such need? You can see that these protesters here are also have the motorists cheering them on because clearly they believe that their cause is worthy.
Malungelo, just in covering these stories over the years as journalists, there does seem to be this trend that residents protest, government officials come on the scene, they make all of these promises regarding housing. You mentioned the promise by former housing MEC Paul Mashatile of those 48,000 stands, and then time lapses and those promises just don't materialize.
That's right. In fact, that's what the residents are saying that they just want land now, and they won't stop, Michelle, until they get that land. This action is really the start of the many of the protests that they'll embark on in order to make sure that they get what they want. I have put out a call to the Gauteng government, Michelle. I'm hoping that they will have a response to some of the claims, to these to the protests that we've seen here in Gauteng, but also, Michelle, to the claims that these residents are talking about, that they were promised that 48,000 stands would be made available to them. They're saying that if they had seen if government had actually begun to act on the promise of servicing that land and then providing them those 48,000 stands, they would have not ended up on the streets.
So Malungelo, you're in one area in Soweto. What are you hearing about the rest of the protests taking place in the other areas?
Michelle, one of the things that we've been seeing as we've been moving around is that police have actually been keeping an eye on many of the routes that were actually affected by these protests. In fact, where this area, that's where the protests are now visible. In some areas, it's only the debris that remains behind. A lot of people seemingly have gone back to their houses, or some have even gone to work.